Good afternoon. It's just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column
What day?
News.
That was a good start.
We're straight on to the fact. It's Monday, the 17th of January.
No, 7th of January. Yes. Okay. Anyway, welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today is Brian Gerrish.
Speechless at the moment.
Absolutely. And well, you're going to be speechless as we work through the news today. A new year. It's 2019. And somebody complaining in the chat box earlier, Brian, that we had a longer break than the MPs did. I think that's fair enough, isn't it?
I think I'm going to be very careful what I say now. I think it's totally fair, and we'll be discussing the MPs a little bit at the end of today's news. So.
Anyway, let's get on to Brexit. I chose the Scotsman here. The headline is Theresa May admits Brexit defeat in Commons could lead to a second referendum on the EU. Well, there are several phrases that we could use at this point, but this is really their coverage of what Theresa May was saying on the Andrew Marr show yesterday. Apparently, the meaningful vote is actually going to take place on the 15th of January. And she said that the vote will definitely go ahead this time, no matter what. It's definitely going to go ahead. If you remember, the last time she had planned to have a meaningful vote, she suddenly decided at the last minute that there wasn't enough support for a meaningful vote, so she wouldn't have it. Nobody has yet explained to me why this particular vote is a meaningful vote, but anyway, we move on. And she said that, of course, she's still opposed to a second referendum, but anything really could happen if her meaningful vote is voted down. 209 MPs today, Brian, have signed a letter to Theresa May asking her to rule out the possibility of a no-deal Brexit. So, well, she hasn't done that yet. But anyway, she was giving a presentation not about Brexit at all today, but about the NHS, which we're going to come on later. I'll come on to later. But look, this is an interesting development here. This is Anne-Marie Trevelyan, MP, and she was tweeting out a couple of days ago, British voters asked us to take the UK out of the EU, then we can work on our new relationship as a sovereign nation. Delaying the order given betrays democracy and leaves us trapped in an EU which is taking tax-making powers away from countries and building a military union. So this apparently seems to be the first MP to actually break ranks and use the proper term, military union. I hear on the grapevine that there may be a couple of more about to do the same. And this would be a pretty good thing because, frankly, at this point, the issue of military union is not part of the Brexit debate. No matter what happens on the meaningful vote next week, this issue needs to be brought into the mainstream and the mainstream media needs to be forced to discuss it. MPs need to be forced to discuss it. And so it's good that one MP at least has decided to break ranks and use the correct terminology.
It's excellent.
It's important.
I think we need to say to people that when we see MPs showing signs of doing the right thing, it's so important that they do get support from members of the public because this helps strengthen them and gives them confidence. So if you are minded to, then ideal opportunity to tweet out support or send an email or pick telephone up or write. Because the more people that now start to speak out on this subject, the better.
Okay, a couple of days ago, there was another dumping of documents about the Integrity Initiative. Anonymous have been added again, so this is the fourth batch of documents have been dropped. Includes this document on screen, at the moment, called Recommendation for the Appointment or Extension of Tenure of an Honorary Colonel in the Territorial Army/Army Regional Unit. And of course, the individual concerned is Chris N. Donnelly, Director of the Institute for Statecraft, which runs the Integrity Initiative. A couple of things of note on this. We've mentioned it before, but highlighted there is the fact that he is an honorary colonel in SGMI. So what is that? Well, here we've got the Army Reserve Unit's website and the Specialist Group Military Intelligence Professional Trained personnel to extend the capability of Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance Brigade. Now, the Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance Brigade of the British Army was created as part of the Army 2020 reform document, and it falls under Force Troops Command. It became operational on the 1st of September 2014. and is responsible for all British Army intelligence capabilities, including electronic warfare, signals intelligence. This is Army signals intelligence, weapon locating, radar, and other technical surveillance equipment. So it's basically the Army's intelligence organization, but I'm fascinated by this little so-called territorial army. Of course, we don't use that term anymore. Reserves, Army Reserves Group, the Specialist Group Military Intelligence, SGMI, Brian, because this is professional trained personnel. Apparently, we're not quite sure exactly whether these are serving reservists or whether they are professionals who've been co-opted into some kind of reserve unit. But it's there to provide additional support in terms of capability of intelligence. I don't know what your thoughts are. The parallel I would draw would perhaps be Orbis Business Intelligence and MI6, also linked to the Integrity Initiative through Pablo Miller and other people. Similar type of setup, really.
It's blurring, isn't it? What they're doing is blurring the boundaries. So is this principally a military unit, or is this a unit which can bring in people from in the private sector, profit-making sector, who can simply step sideways into a reservist position and then come into this unit? So I'm very, very curious as to what's going on here, but I don't get a good feeling about it. We are seeing more and more that when you think you're dealing with the Ministry of Defence, for example, you're actually dealing with the Foreign Office. When you think you're dealing with the military, you're actually dealing with one of the military contractors. And now we're moving into this sideways, into this intelligence area. So I think there's a lot more questions to be asked. And I don't get a good feeling. Privatisation of the military.
Absolutely. Well, let's come back to this document then. The other thing that was of interest on this was under his awards, decorations. And what do we have here? We have Lithuanian decoration here. I'm not quite clear why this man would be receiving a Lithuanian decoration, other than one of the other documents which was released was this one, which shows the Integrity Initiative's activities in Lithuania. And what we seem to have here, Brian, is some kind of fusion going on, a fusion of government, non-government and academia to produce what they're describing as a methodology that can be employed within Lithuania to reduce the impact of Russian malign interference and increase societal resilience. So this is what he's been given, the Order of the Lithuanian Grand Duke Gediminas. Well, somebody else has had that as well, this man, George Soros, so he's also had that. They're really the only two notable foreigners in the sort of political or the geopolitical arena that I could see that had received this. It is an award which is given to Lithuanians and also to people from outside the country that are non-citizens. So the only other sort of geopolitical character was this one, a bit unusual. Other documents that were released were details of Integrity Initiative staff salaries, ranging from 30,000 a year pro rata up to 80,000 a year pro rata. Then we had a couple of invoices, a number of invoices, this one to produce articles about poison gas and nerve agents. So I can't imagine what that was about.
Well, again, we're in this no man's land. What do we actually do? This is supposedly an organisation advising the government.
Well, no, this is an organisation which is countering disinformation, and what they're doing here is that they are sponsoring, in this case, Strong Point Security, to write articles about poison gas and nerve agents. So this is all about providing foundations to government narratives by paying people to write the articles that you want to write. So what we're seeing is journalists supporting each other's work by citing each other. But in this case, we're finding a non-governmental organisation funded by the government providing content for newspapers, which support and provide foundation to the government's narrative, bogus narrative, in the case of the Skripal affair, which is clearly what this one was about. And just for the sake of pointing it out, this document was also there, produced by Glenn O'Hara, Professor of Modern and Contemporary History, Oxford Brookes University. Who are the Corbynites and what do they believe? So this is adding some weight to the allegations that the Labour Party were pushing out, that the Integrity Initiative was actually providing material which was anti-Corbyn. This document, I can't say reading through this document that it is anti-Corbyn specifically, but what it does do is provide an analysis of who are Corbynites, what do they believe in, do they support the United States or not, how do Corbynites' opinions on certain issues compare with the opinions of the public at large. So it's a piece of research specifically into the Corbynites. I haven't yet seen similar research into Theresa May's followers, if she has any left.
I've got a feeling we won't find it.
No.
That's what I think. But it would be very helpful if anybody out there who's got communications with the Labour Party would help to push across this material. And of course, a vast amount of material and articles now on the UK column site, which is not anywhere else, about what these organisations are doing. So if you can help promulgate that to the Labour Party, it will be very beneficial.
In the meantime, everybody will be pleased to know that registration is now open for the Girls Competition 2019 online round. It opens on, the actual competition opens on the 21st of January 2018. Well, this is all about GCHQ attempting to get girls into the area of cyber security. They're particularly looking for girls aged 12 to 13 who are going to be operating in teams of 4 alongside a teacher mentor. And they're going to tackle a series of codes and puzzles, and they're going to attempt to win £1,000 for their school. Well, apparently GCHQ is particularly concerned about this because only 11% of the global cyber workforce are women. Well, the Deputy Director of the National Cybersecurity Centre told the Sunday Times yesterday apparently that taking part will help girls develop new skills, gain rare insight into the world of national security, and hopefully inspire tech-savvy girls to consider cybersecurity as a career. So that's all pretty good stuff, Brian. It seems like we need to try to indoctrinate our children as young as possible.
You've used indoctrination. I just jotted down the word grooming. This is grooming children to become part of the state spying apparatus, and as we've already covered in that earlier segment, that we now see that what is the state and what is profit-making private corporations becoming very blurred. But now GCHQ, which is unable to give the government any assistance in breaking down child trafficking rings or paedophile rings, GCHQ simply does not have the acumen to do that, but it can bring in young girls for training. And I'll just add, quite extraordinary, took the dog for a walk last couple of days and ended up talking to a gentleman who said he was astonished at the number of United States plated cars and EU cars parked in the GCHQ car park. This apparently is raising some interest in the local Cheltenham community. They're obviously fairly well up on who drives in and out of the GCHQ car park. We know that Americans and Europeans do operate alongside GCHQ, but he was fascinated by the sheer volume of foreign cars. So is this a massive child grooming program for across the United States and Europe, or have we got something completely different going on in the background? Just an anecdotal story, but we'll see where that one leads. Well, if we can't defend the country against the Russians, can we run the National Health Service? And of course, Theresa May getting very excited with her new plans to really transform the NHS with an additional 23 billion, I think the figure was, that's going to be popped in.
Haven't they been trying to transform the NHS for quite a number of years now?
Yes, but the big problem, Mike, as we're going to see, is that they have to do it in the dark because what's really going on is privatisation. But this is an article from Politics Home, charming photograph of the Prime Minister, of course. She's essentially saying that patients will have access to a world-class health service once the NHS 10-year plan is put into force. The launch of the NHS long-term plan marks a historic step to secure its future and offers a vision for the service for the next 10 years with a focus on ensuring that every pound is spent in a way that will most benefit patients. This will help relieve pressure on the NHS while providing the basis to transform care with world-class treatments. So this is all the language, isn't it? This is the rhetoric, it's the vision. The NHS is not performing. People in the NHS working desperately hard in an increasingly chaotic situation, but not to worry because Theresa's got a vision. Well, what she's apparently said alongside her vision is that it's got to be kept out of the headlines. Well, the NHS has. So very interesting. This was The Guardian. Simon Stevens, who's the boss of NHS England and the man who's going to mastermind Theresa's plan, he's been told to keep the NHS, out of the headlines.
Is that to keep the NHS out of the headlines or to keep the transformation of the NHS
well, to
out
keep
of the
headlines? Any trouble about the NHS out of the headlines. Good question, Mike, because I had to read several of these articles several times to see how the headline transformed into detail in the article, because several papers were saying that it had to be kept out of the headlines, but when you actually said what has to be kept out, it became quite vague. But one of the key lines here was, behind Theresa May's demands lay an unspoken need for the plan to keep health quiet as a political issue, to stop it causing endless bad headlines for the Conservatives. So the Conservatives not interested in helping to treat people, heal people, look after the population. The most important thing is to keep any problems around the NHS out of the headlines, because of course that could damage the Conservative Party. So come in a different angle, back to politics home here, and we pick up on the same thing. The Prime Minister's comments came as Matt Hancock outlined plans for targeted advertising by ministers on those who place the largest burden on the NHS through unhealthy living. So there's no blame at government level. The problem with the NHS is us. We're being unhealthy, we're eating too much, we're smoking, we're drinking too much. And so this is going to essentially unleash the behavioural insights team onto us. This is targeted application of neurolinguistics. So people are going to be retrained by the government to become healthier, and that way the NHS can continue to work. It's brilliant stuff. Well, we were able to get some comment this morning from Lucy Reynolds, and Lucy was one of our key speakers at the UK Column Dying for Good Health conference back in May last year. And she did a brilliant analysis of what was happening in the NHS. When we spoke to her this morning, these were some of the simple points that she made. We hope we're going to get more detail from Lucy and some of the other speakers in the coming weeks, but let's have a look. She said originally, the NHS used to be good, but of course everybody recognised it wasn't perfect. Back in 1979, a mere 3.5 to 5% was spent on administration. In 2018, or bringing it up to date, the figure's closer to 25%. And this is very, very important analysis, because it starts to really get to the heart of what's going on in the NHS. The 31% figure is for the US across the board.
It's an interesting figure as well, because yesterday or this morning, I can't remember which, the BBC were arguing that actually the amount of money that the British NHS was spending on administration was lower than Germany, for example, and they were quoting figures significantly lower than that. So I suspect there's a bit of a bit of argument within the establishment about what administration is, and I would trust Dr. Lucy Reynolds' figures a bit more than the BBC's on this one, I have to admit.
Well, I would say absolutely, but we're just giving a reflection here. We'll come into this in more detail, as I say, in coming days and weeks. But it's very interesting to get this analysis. And she makes the point again that hospitals have now become profit making. Everywhere you go, if you go to Derriford Hospital in Plymouth, you arrive and the first thing you see is the supermarket attached to the front of the hospital, and that's there as a concession because of course the hospital can make money. This is about profit. Now the next point she makes is that in the US, medical insurance is used to contain costs for profit-making healthcare. And she's saying that at the same time that's going on, 2/3 of bankruptcies are due to medical claims where 3/4, 3 out of 4 people were insured, but the companies refused to pay out. Now, this is really, really interesting analysis because, of course, it takes us into the real heart of what happens when you try to make profit out of sick people. And of course, she also points out that in the US, where you can supposedly get health insurance via your employees, this is very high risk because if you look at the documentation, it means there's actually no direct contract between the person needing care and the insurance companies themselves. So there's been a lot of cases where people think they've had health insurance via their employment, but when they've put it to the test, that's been rescinded. And this is what is going on in the background. The plan is now to take away the PFI contracts from the hospitals, to release the hospitals from the PFIs. That would require the Treasury to take over that debt effectively. But why would you want to do this? The moment you've done it, the hospitals can then be fully sold into private hands. So the whole of Lucy's analysis is that what Theresa May is doing is continuing this very deep, dark, conservative privatisation of the NHS. Why don't they want to talk to the public about it? Because, of course, if they talk to the public about what's actually going on, the public is going to realise the NHS is being privatised. I'll just put up a couple of slides here. This was from the conference itself, but very interesting detailed statistics that Lucy Reynolds produced here, showing infant mortality, how much is being spent in the world. But you've got at the top level from left to right, huge disparity, huge amounts of money being spent supposedly to prevent infant mortality in America, whereas in other parts of the world, much smaller sums. Czech Republic, for example, is way over on the left. Estonia is another one. Much smaller sums of money being spent, presumably more efficiently, in order to bring down infant mortality rates. And this one here showing a striking difference between expenditure versus lifespan. And essentially what you've got on the left-hand side with the steep green line is states that are directly spending money on health treatment, and they are preventing things becoming more serious. They're curing people. They're getting very good results for the dollars that they're spending. Whereas on the right-hand side, you're seeing more and more money being spent as countries and societies move towards a privatized healthcare system. And they're, of course, way over to the right with vast expenditure but relatively poor performance is America. And yet it's the American model that the Conservatives are trying to bring in. This was a little bit more that Lucy Reynolds was warning about. The Health and Social Care Bill 2011 set out the conversion of the NHS funding pool into a set of competing state-owned insurance-style funds, which are now called the clinical commissioning groups. And she also said that almost all of these now rely on United Health subsidiary Optum. So why is that last comment of interest? Well, this is the gentleman who was given the task, Simon Stevens, of bringing this new plan into play. He was working with regard to the NHS for Labour as well. So he simply seamlessly moved across, as it were, to the Conservatives. But he's got a background with United Health, it appears. And so it seems reasonable that changes he wants to make are going to help bring in this US-style health care. We'll report more on this when we've got the detailed information.
Okay, right, China obviously has had a bit of success over the last few days with its lunar mission. This is the Chang'e 4. It was launched not so long ago. It has an orbiter, a robotic lander, and a rover, and the rover is now on the moon, apparently taking images and so on. Exploring the unknown is human nature. This is Wu Weiren, the chief of the Chinese lunar program, is saying the moon is a mysterious world to us. We have a responsibility to explore and understand it. Exploration of the moon will also deepen our understanding of Earth and of ourselves. Well, that may be the case. The Russians, for their part, have said that they're very pleased with the success of this mission. On behalf of Roscosmos State Corporation and on my own behalf, I want to congratulate you, the Chinese, and the entire team of the China National Space Administration on the successful launch of Chang'e 4 mission. That's Dmitry Rogozin. Now, Dmitry Rogozin, as I say, is the director of Russia's Roscosmos, and he was invited to the United States recently to visit NASA. Well, that hasn't gone down too well with the US administration, who have decided that it's not a great idea. And as a result, Jim Bridgeston, the NASA administrator, has decided to abandon that visit. This is the various senators that have decided that any Russian on US soil is not a good idea. So he has said that we had heard from numerous senators suggesting that this was not a good idea, and I wanted to be accommodating to the interests of the senators, and so I've rescinded the invitation. He also, he was. The key point here is, Brian, that to my mind, what China is doing, and if we look back at the quote from, actually we'll come on to the quote from President Xi in a moment, but what China is doing seems to be a relatively positive thing. They are looking at developing their own country, developing their own technologies, and taking on these types of projects in order to drive that development. The US doesn't seem to be taking this same position. The UK certainly isn't taking the same position. Our space industry, relatively speaking, remains a bit of a joke, and that's not the fault of anybody working in that industry. That is the fault of government policy. Last year, we reported in March, the space industry bill received royal assent, which the government was talking about it unlocking an exciting era of British space innovation, exploration, and investment. We can see how quickly that's working, can't we? And apparently this was going to mean spaceports being built, British businesses investing, and so on. It was not only going to ensure Britain is capable of launching small satellites and scientific experiments from our own soil, but also able to take advantage of future developments like hypersonic flight and high-speed point-to-point transport. Well, I would just like to make the point, Brian, that while we are pursuing negative policies with regard to other countries and regard to development around the world, we had a satellite launching capability that was Black Arrow, and we had Black Knight, Blue Streak, and Black Arrow, which represented world-beating British engineering, which apparently we're not allowed to have anymore. So we are the only country, we have to be proud of this, we are the only country to have ever successfully developed and then abandoned a satellite launch capability.
And I think we should bring in here that, of course, one of the people that has commented on that project is David Barmby, author of the EU
Collective? No, sorry.
The EU, a corporatist racket. And in that text, one of the things that he is talking about is the use of Black Arrow project as a bargaining chip with joining the common market. So we go back into some really dark politics here where UK capability was stalled in order to help promote the move through into the European Union. If you'd like to read more on that, you will find it if you go searching for it on the internet. But clearly it's not a simple matter.
No, so over the weekend then the Chinese were talking about ramping up preparations for war in 2019. This is what President Xi said: the world is facing a period of major changes never seen in a century, and China is still in an important period of strategic opportunity for development. So even in light of the ramping up, increasing the budget for military matters, he's still talking about development. But just to put it into perspective, the new military budget that is announced for 2019 is £126 billion. Brian, it's not exactly a fraction of what the United States is spending. It's certainly not a fraction of what the EU, the new unified EU military budget is. And so we've got to keep that in perspective. I wonder how much money has been spent on this lunar project, and by comparison, if British policy was doing the same or taking the same type of attitude, perhaps
of investing in Britain,
we might be in a much more positive position.
Yeah. Well, let's stay on the subject of war. Thanks very much to the viewer that highlighted this article for us. So we've got Asia Times: UK's hope of Indo-Pacific strike group with France is premature. I've got to say I smiled as I read this article because it's talking as if Britain still had a viable Royal Navy, and we were able to promote power around the world. Of course, this is absolutely untrue at the moment. Let's read some of it here. UK Defence Secretary Gavin Williamson has made it clear that the Royal Navy will keep an unbroken presence in the Indo-Pacific in 2019 and beyond. The British government says such a deployment is aimed at protecting the rules-based global order, including freedom of navigation, seen as the underpinning of Britain's security and prosperity as an island trading nation. So it's very interesting, Mike, this language now coming into the global dictionary. What are we doing out there? We're protecting the rules-based global order. I wonder how many of the sailors, the military people, actually know that's what they're doing, according to Gavin. The article went on saying a document released last September, the British Ministry of Defence claimed that when the Royal Navy's 2 new aircraft carriers would be ready for operations in the early 2020s, including in the Indo-Pacific region, Britain and France would be able to deploy a combined carrier strike group incorporating vessels and assets from both naval forces. What have we got here? We've got EU military unification. This is more evidence of it. And of course, if you talk France, you are speaking about the EU, because France is subsumed into the EU. But the joke, of course, is that neither Britain nor France have got the capability to put a strike group together. And so what is this? EU posturing without any substance to back it up?
Well, it is because, of course, one of the first countries to join the new strike group was the Netherlands. So the Netherlands Navy have already committed to providing ships for these new carrier strike groups. So it's not just going to be a British-French initiative. It's going to include other EU nations as well. And so this is a bit of obfuscation by the Asia Times, perhaps, to suggest that it's purely a UK-French initiative?
Well, most of the article, to be fair to the Times, Mike, goes on to discuss how many units we've got available and what Britain is really capable of doing, and what conclusion do they come to that we're woefully short of units and we can't provide it. But good news, because Harry has come out, and a number of papers have been talking over the last couple of days and saying that he's going to Norway to support 1,000 Royal Marines who were there in a show of strength against Russia. Of course, the Mirror's headline is slightly weak because there's a total of 8,000 troops, because there's troops from other nations as well. But Harry has gone to give his support to the Royal Marines because they're going to be standing up against the Russians because, well, we're back in a Cold War situation apparently. So Harry will be totally immersed in the exercise. As tensions between the West and Russia grow to almost Cold War levels, the Duke will be present in the country as the Marines practice drills in a show of strength against potential military strikes by Moscow. It's brilliant stuff, isn't it? Ramp up the fear, ramp up the rhetoric. And the war veteran is said to be relishing joining the Royal Marines on the front line of an Arctic exercise aimed at warning Vladimir Putin that Britain and her allies have the power to hit back with 1,000 Royal Marines, Mike. Yes. So I can't help but smile at that. Here's the Evening Standard. What did they say? Well, he won't be in uniform. It's a visit. He's just going to show his support. So he's not going to be there in the gear on the front line. And here's the a little bit more detail. 8,000 strong demonstration is expected to include light armoured marine vehicles, mortars, rockets, artillery and anti-tank attacks. This is a very small exercise, Mike. I don't think that the Russians are going to be worried about this. Special forces will be involved and commandos will lead a retaliation against a mock Russian invasion. Okay. You feel more confident now?
I do.
Good.
I
Excellent.
do. But this is going to be a British operation. It's not NATO.
Well, there's, it's not in the articles that I've read. It's not named as being NATO, so I'm not too sure. I may have missed something here, but is it NATO or is it an EU exercise? Will be interesting to find out. Yeah. Somebody will correct us, I'm sure. Now let's come on to the good news, because the good news is that my local Conservative MP, Gary Streeter, a favourite of mine, has been honoured with a knighthood.
I can't think of a more deserving person.
Well, when I happened to pop in the local shop and saw the headline, I knew I had to buy the paper. And the good news is it's a family affair. Let's have a look at why that is. Well, it's here. The MP and former Conservative Minister Gary Streeter has said he was shocked to be awarded a knighthood in the New Year's Honours list. He was deeply honoured by the knighthood, and he added, "I want to dedicate the award to my wife and family for supporting me through the last quarter of a century at Westminster." That's quite a comment, isn't it? That it's a family affair.
Was his wife employed by him?
I think she was at one stage, yes.
So that would be why she was supporting him then, because he was paying her to?
Well, maybe. It's all quite complex, isn't it, when you get to MPs and their spouses and offices and all those sorts of things. But there we are. It's a family affair. Well, actually, it's not a family affair, because if we look at what the Herald reported, he said he's delighted and thrilled. I've known for a couple of weeks now, so it's been quite hard to keep it secret, but I am humbled and honoured and see this as recognition for our region and our city as well. So where does that take you? Our, that's a very interesting expression, isn't it? So
well, who is we in this context?
Well, I don't really know. I've got to say I don't know. What has he also had to say about what he achieved? Well, I thought I'd search on the internet for his achievements. Presumably if you become a Dark Lord, Sir, as it is in this case, you're going to have, well, quite a list of achievements. Well, I couldn't really find anything apart from Mr. Streeter said this about himself. "If people ask me, as they sometimes do, what is my greatest achievement at Westminster in my 26 years, I usually point to helping to win the Trident contract for Devonport when it was destined for Rosyth. It's brought millions of pounds into our economy and provided thousands of well-paid jobs." So he did that, and what did he do since then? Has he actually challenged the government on the decline of the Royal Navy, of the shutting down of bases, shutting down of the Royal Marines bases? Has he talked about the pitiful state of the Royal Navy operationally? Well, in fact, when we challenged him on this, of course, he got very aggressive and very personal, even though the mainstream papers were reporting we couldn't get a submarine to sea.
But isn't the Trident contract moving to Scotland?
I think parties might.
Yes.
What's going to be here, I don't know. Why would he be given a knighthood? Well, I think he's been given a knighthood because he did a good job for the government. Would that be a reasonable thing to say? And maybe he's going to do a good job for the government in the future by remaining silent on key issues. We'll see.
Well, he's certainly been remaining silent on the issue of NHS privatisation over the years, hasn't he?
It would seem,
amongst others.
Seem to be. And I'm also going to bring in this lady, Melanie Shaw. We understand that there's going to be a sentencing in the next few days. Now, Melanie Shaw is one of a number of child abuse cases that we have taken through to members of Parliament, and indeed some of those cases have also been taken through to the cross-party Christian group, where no action was ever taken at all. Why do I mention that group? Because of course Gary Streeter is proud to boast that he's worked very hard as one of the joint chairmen of the cross-party Christian group. So this is the reality, Mike, isn't it? That the Conservative Party wants to keep it quiet, what's really happening in the NHS, because the NHS is being privatised. So what do you want? You want to deceive the public, and then to make sure the system works smoothly, we hand out the honours to see that our boys are going to do what the top tier want. It's pretty cynical stuff, isn't it really? We'll end there. Pleasure to be back in 2019. And I'd also like to thank people who continue to send us emails, and there were more Christmas cards arrived. So we were really quite amazed at the support that we had at the end of last year. Thank you very much for the positive comments, and we'll keep it going this year.
See you on Wednesday.
See you Wednesday.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.